You're listening to the Love Doctors. Call toll free 1-877-927-6969. This is Real Radio.
On the line is Pastor Fred Phelps from Westboro Baptist Church in Topeka, Kansas. Good morning, Pastor. How are you today?
Morning. I'm all right. How you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Good.
Doing well. How does it feel to be, because of you, the U.S. government has had to pass a law. That's amazing. One person caused this law to be passed, and we talked about it before the break, but the new law limits protest at national cemeteries to within 300 feet of a cemetery's entrance and within 150 feet of the road into the cemetery for 60 minutes before and 60 minutes after a military funeral. And that's strictly because of you and the actions of you and your family.
Well, it doesn't change anything, though, you know.
Why?
If it changed something, we would sue them.
Well,
and Barney Frank, you know, who's not a fan of mine,
right?
Out of the closet homosexual member of Congress,
yes,
was one of three in the House of Representatives who voted against that thing. It was almost unanimous.
Well, why did he vote against it? Because of the free speech thing?
Yeah, he said it's unconstitutional. He says it won't survive.
Well,
he's a smart lawyer, you know. It won't survive a court test.
Well, I'm not a lawyer. I am a reverend, and but I'm a free speech kind of person. And I got to tell you, I find it pretty strange that this thing passed the way it did.
Well, we picketed Arlington Cemetery Tuesday, a Marine funeral.
Right. I just talked about that, man. Yeah.
And we picketed in the exact same spot. We always picket Arlington.
Yeah, but let me ask you,
300 feet plus.
Could you help the audience, if you wouldn't mind, Pastor? There is a bit of a disconnect here when you're protesting homosexuality at the military funeral of a man that's not a homosexual. Could you tie that all into one happy bundle for everybody?
Well, you start with the proposition that the Lord God Almighty is mad at this country because they've turned it over to the homosexuals.
In what way have we turned it over to the homosexuals?
Well, in a multitude of ways. Number one, same-sex marriage is now the law of the land.
No, it isn't.
Oh, yes, it is. Anybody with an eye to critically examine this thing, it's a fait accompli. You saw what that fiasco in the Senate.
Yeah.
It will never get out of the Senate, and if it did, it would never pass three-fourths of the states because the sodomites control the centers of political power in this country.
You're telling me that...
And control the Supreme Court of the United States.
But Pastor, we've got Republicans in the White House, Republicans in the Senate, we've got the Republicans running the House of Representatives, and Republicans, basically conservatives, running the Supreme Court. Are you telling me that all those organizations are run by homosexuality? The Republicans are homosexuals?
Well, you made a giant leap there, but what I'm telling you is that 2 weeks before 9/11, Bush nominated an out-of-the-closet flaming faggot.
Who's that?
The United States ambassador to Romania. His name is Michael Guest.
Yeah.
1 week after God destroyed those towers and sent that terrible Holocaust into this country,
yes, sir,
he ordered Powell, then Secretary of State, to swear him in.
Yeah.
He does never learn.
Yeah.
He's got this federal bureaucracy laced with militant homosexuals. And then you see over in Eastern Europe now with that homosexual with his lover.
Who's that?
And they have some,
Who's that?
Michael Guest.
Okay.
American Embassy in
right.
Bucharest.
Right.
And every time they have some kind of an affair of state, we're pushing homosexuality down the throats of those people because they need us. Can you imagine why all of Europe now calls America a fag nation?
I didn't know they were calling us that.
Well, if we got an ambassador from the most powerful nation in the world to come and sit in the embassy, and he doesn't just practice it and keep his mouth shut.
Yeah.
He's a militant homosexual.
Well,
He just appointed Izzy Hernandez, Bush, an old-time friend of his, another out-of-the-closet homosexual, to be Undersecretary of Commerce in charge of all foreign trade.
So you're not a George Bush fan then, are you?
Well, look, I've told you what he's done.
Yeah.
And Clinton, by the stroke of a pen, opened up the military to homosexuals.
That he did.
Don't ask, don't tell.
That he did,
I was thinking as soon as Bush gets in there, he's going to repeal each one of those executive orders. He not only didn't repeal it, he amplified it.
So your feeling is the Republicans basically in this country are just as evil as the Democrats?
Well, sure. Cheney's daughter's a dyke. Yeah. Rather than repudiate her conduct, he now has embraced it and says that we ought to be able to marry in this country. And so you got Bush saying pass an amendment and Cheney trumping it.
So because that makes sense to me
now, Pastor Phelps.
Look, have you heard of Brokeback Mountain?
Yeah.
10 years ago, that would not have flown. 10 years ago,
did you see it?
Ellen DeGeneres came out on her program. It was canceled.
Now let me ask you a question.
She's running the media.
You brought a question. You brought up something very important to me there. Now you mentioned Brokeback Mountain, then you mentioned Ellen DeGeneres about the lesbians. Do you feel that strongly about lesbians too? Because I think that's kind of hot to watch lesbians.
Well, shame on you. I'll see you later.